This is Sidebar. Sidebar, a frank discussion on the law, life, and liberty.
Oh, my.
Sponsored by the LaHood Norton Law Group. And now, your objection sustained. Your hosts, Karen Klaus and former Bexar County District Attorney, Nico LaHood.
1200 WOAI. This year is winding down. One more day of 2023, and everything's going to be better after that. Well, this is Sidebar. Former Bexar County DA Nico LaHood, trial lawyer, managing partner of LaHood Norton Law Group, and George Araujo scholar, former chemist and pharmaceutical researcher and director. One thing that we talked about last week, we talked about for the entire year is the border, but if you've been on the internet at all, if you've been on social media at all, you cannot deny that things are extreme and they seem to be accelerating, and the caravans are starting up again, and the numbers just continue. Am I mistaken with that? Is it just like pictures from a movie that they're repeating, or are there more?
Well, it seems like the messaging is don't believe your lying eyes, right? I mean, so it's not what you think it is. The economy's great.
Oh, yeah,
things
that's right.
are wonderful.
Oh, yeah.
Inflation's good. Things are going great.
Bidenomics.
We have the border under control. I mean, it's just because you say it is so, it doesn't mean it's so. But it's interesting to see. But the technique, I guess, has worked in the past. I think people are waking up. The border is a travesty. I mean, it's horrific. People down there. I know people did live in those. Most people in Texas do know people that live down there. Republican and Democrat alone. This is just an issue. It's not a political issue. I know nationally they're trying to make it a political issue. It is. It's a part of politics, of course, advocacy. But I mean, people, this is insane. I mean, you have New York, where Eric Adams, welcomed people. I mean, I saw somebody played a collage of our little clips of all his statements of we welcome you here, we want to help you, we want to make sure you're taken care of. And then they show up, and percentage-wise, what is it, 67,000? What is that per cap? What does that work out percentage-wise of New York citizens there? I mean, it's much smaller than these border towns, 10%, 5%, whatever the percentage is. So someone correct me. And then they're going bananas, freaking out, filling up hotels, ruining the economy over there, ruining the culture there in New York. And then over here in these border towns, you're talking 100, 200% immigration coming in, people coming in per capita of the border towns.
Larger than the population.
Larger, thank you, Karen. You said it better than I did. Larger than the population, 100%. And we're supposed to ignore that. They're supposed to ignore that. The states are supposed to, from Arizona to Texas, are supposed to ignore that. And so when you have the governor of New York waking up saying, don't come here, which I'm glad they're saying that, but where's the accountability? Why this needs to be said more. The news needs to be pushing this more, showing people that these ideas suck. You can't continue to have this. I know George wants to talk about, and we need to talk about this deal that the United States has made with Mexico, and it's a crappy deal. It needs to be reported on more by national news, and I don't know if it has or hasn't, but I mean, this is a real problem. And like I said, I've been saying this for how many months now? I'm the closest to a single issue voter as I've ever been, and it's the border. It's illegal immigration. I mean, we cannot forget all the other issues if we don't get this under control.
We're gonna definitely talk about this because I need to understand it more, because the implications aren't just Texas, aren't just the United States. You can see the end. The end is that cities collapse. The regular citizen, the middle America is gone, and I can't understand how this is a good plan. On the other hand, another topic that I hope we get a chance to talk about, and that is Trump and another state Supreme Court. Is it Supreme Court trying to get him off of the ballot?
Secretary of State. It's not even a Supreme Court.
Secretary of State, yes.
Unappointed Secretary of State, not even an elected appointed Secretary of State.
That's important.
So how is this going to rule? How is this going to play out? Will they keep him off the ballot? Is this something that could really happen?
Well,
possible versus probable. Possible, I guess.
We just talked about this very
probable,
thing.
no.
Just talked about that, yeah.
Oh, did you?
Possible and probable.
Yeah,
anything's possible. I mean,
yeah.
there's possible that it's possible on some planet somewhere in some universe there's a multicolored unicorn, but it's highly improbable. I think that's how we ought to be looking at it here. It's possible, but I think it's highly improbable that Trump is going to be kept off the ballot. This is unbelievable arrogance, it seems to me. But it's who this person is that bears some conversation. But go ahead, Nick.
Karen, do you know who this person is? So in Maine,
please give
the
me
Secretary of State and the Attorney General are appointed. They're not elected. Now we don't. Our Secretary of State is appointed also, but our Attorney General is elected. And so on her own, as we say, sua sponte, on her own, she made the determination. I mean, I actually, I pulled a George and I actually looked up her statement. I mean, her statement is ridiculously arrogant. Of course, my phone's not working right now. There it is. It's ridiculously arrogant. It says, I reviewed Section 3 of the 14th Amendment very carefully. Well, thank you for doing that. And I determined that Section 3 of the 14th Amendment does not say conviction. It says engage, she said.
Wow.
And let's go back and keep in mind that the events of January 6/21 were unprecedented and tragic, she continued. This was an attack not only on the Capitol and the government officials, the former vice president, members of Congress, but an attack on the rule of law. Isn't that interesting how they use the attack of rule of law, democracy? This is an attack on democracy as they attack democracy, to play on words. And the weight of evidence that, here once again, the arrogance of this statement, the weight of evidence that I reviewed indicated that it was in fact an insurrection. And Mr. Trump engaged in that insurrection under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. I mean, the arrogance of that statement and how she's denying people the right to vote, I mean, is ridiculous. I mean, and it's good to see there's I think his name is Golden. Andrew is a representative, Golden, Democrat that voted to impeach Trump, that said we're a nation of laws. This is ridiculous. Even Gavin Newsom, I mean, I think he sees the writing on the wall, and he doesn't want to have blood on his hands per se, and have egg on his face, to where he's saying don't think about doing it here. I mean, so you're seeing other states at least wake up saying, look, we don't mind breaking the rules, but not that rule. I mean, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, think about where we are right now, just in terms of what Nico just said in the overall context of these lawsuits. 39 lawsuits across 36 lawsuits, across 32 states. And we have 19 so far that have weighed in to decline removing Trump from the ballot. So more than half. And all of this, while there are serious questions that haven't been answered about the applicability of the Section 3 and the 14th Amendment to Trump, and all kinds of jurisdiction questions that we tackled last week on Sidebar, I think those are significant concerns. The fact that Congress really holds the right here to weigh in, not individuals like Shanna Bellows in Maine or Jenna Griswold in Colorado, but in fact, Congress has the singular ability to weigh in on these kinds of things. Congress did throw out the disqualification clause, Nico, already in 1872 and 1898. They've thrown that disqualification clause out. So a significant body of scholars.
Explain what that is, George.
The disqualification clause in Section 3 of the 14th Amendment is premised on certain individuals leading an insurrection against the United States, or rebellion against the United States. And these individuals are elected officials like senators or congressmen. They are electors of president and vice president, not president and vice president, but electors of president and vice president, which every state produces electors. We have an electoral college that decides whether we'll have a president, not by popular vote. Right there, we know we're not a democracy, because if we were a democracy, we'd be electing by popular vote, but we don't do that, because then we'd obviously erase any kind of minority voice, and so we are a constitutional republic. That said, the Section 3 of the 14th Amendment is very particular about who it pertains to. So again, elected officials, senators, congressmen. It talks about electors to president or vice president. It talks about state officials, and state officials are appointed, not elected. It talks about other elected officials. And so there's serious questions about whether Trump is even qualified to be considered. And the point is that Congress in 1872 and 1898, as it pertains to those offices, basically threw out the disqualification clause. It declared it null and void. in 1872 and 1898. So there's another question about whether any of this is relevant because Congress says it's irrelevant. So it's in the midst of all this that this person weighs in. And so I got curious about who this person actually is because it's unbelievable hubris, like you said. It's breathtakingly arrogant. So if you trace back, you'll find that in 2021, and this is a former ACLU official in 2021, Shana Bellows and Jenna Griswold from Colorado, Secretary of State of Colorado, attended a left-wing conference, and I wanted to pull out her statement because I think it says a lot about where she's coming from. This has been in the works for years. This isn't new. Quote, "We need to organize," and this is Shana Bellows from Maine, "we need to organize to make sure we have better leaders in positions of power to fight back against quote unquote election sabotage." And she said that back in 2021. And she basically goes on to say that SPLC, the Southern Poverty Law Center, and the American Civil Liberties Union were working to bar Trump from the ballot as early as 2021. This has been a work in progress. She's former ACLU, attending that conference in 2021, was also Jenna Griswold from Colorado. This isn't something that just happened over the last 3 weeks. This has been a plan for the last 2 years, working with activist organizations to really make sure that Trump doesn't even get a chance to run. So basically, to do a run around our electoral process, to basically negate the citizens' right to pick leaders in the name of democracy. This isn't new. I want people to understand who this individual is. This is a rogue activist, like Nico said, who's been appointed to Secretary of State. And I would expect to see more and more of this as we go into 2024, because that's the culture we're in right now.
Oh, where can we hide? Where can we hide?
Well, we shouldn't hide. I know you're just joking, but I mean, we need to talk about this. But they're seeking to impeach her. Somebody from Maine wants to impeach her. But this is where we have to be very careful. This overzealous impeachment process that we have to be careful how it's used.
Okay, we're going to take a break, and we will be right back with answers, hopefully, and more on Sidebar. Remember, you can go to sidebartv.com and watch us on social media, Facebook Live, and we will do that during the show, but we also continue after the show. That's sidebartv.com. So what we were talking about before, Trump and this huge push to try and get him off the ballot. And the question, I want to hear all about it. I want to hear all of the details. But my question in the beginning generally is this another thing that's going to help him or hurt him, that this information comes out, whether they keep him on the ballot or not? Is it going to help him, hurt him?
Well, all you can do is look at the history, and historically, the more attacks they have lodged against him have helped him. This one is a pretty significant one because I think this one shocks the conscience of anybody who has a rational, logical mindset of order and laws and the Constitution. It's not really, I mean, they're believers, but maybe not activists, as George, or they haven't really delusional and win at all costs type mentality. They want to win. They don't mind stretching, but they don't want to win at all costs. I think it shocks those people, and maybe just practically shocks them. I hope it morally and integrity wise shocks them, but even practically shocks them. I think man, this could turn to us. I mean, that's part. I say this often: be careful the world you help create, because someday you may have to live in it. I mean, is this the standard? Is the standard going to be that the president that leaves, the party that leaves office, gets prosecuted by the opposing party once they're out of office? Is that the standard? Now, I mean, obviously, if a president is not above the law, but I mean, we're really stretching things here. When you're looking at Trump, when you're looking at this lady that seems like she just wants her 15 minutes of fame, Bellows. I mean, there's no way a rational thinker under this Supreme Court, I'm not saying it couldn't happen ever, but under this Supreme Court would allow this to happen. And I would hope and really pray, and I'm not saying that hyperbolically, pray that it, and we talked about it last week, that it's a 9-0 decision. And whenever they speak on this, I mean, they're not going to, I mean, whether they do it relatively quickly or they take a little bit of time, now that there's appeals that George will talk about from Colorado and the GOP from Colorado. But I hope I really do hope, because they all have to be on the same page on this one. If they're not on the same page on this one, then we're going to have some problems moving forward. I mean, even if it's a substantial win, if it's a 7-2 or whatever, I really hope and pray it's a 9-0 decision to say, look, this is it, guys. We're really crossing lines here.
From Nico's mouth to God's ears, I hope it is a 9-0 decision. I'm skeptical that it will be, Nico. I do believe that this will be, that it will not be upheld. But I would envision an 8-1, maybe a 7-2. I certainly hope it's a 9-0. But having said that, the court is probably just gauging from how John Roberts likes to roll. He's sort of an incrementalist, and he doesn't want to weigh into these huge divisive political questions. And I think being an incrementalist, I think they're going to ride this out. Remember, the Colorado decision says that this basically, because Colorado has to make a decision by January 5th on who's going to be on the ballot. So basically, they have until January 4th. And if the court sat silent and nobody appealed, then it would go into effect and Trump would be barred from the ballot. But the Colorado GOP has filed an appeal. Thank goodness. The Trump campaign has already indicated that they would file an appeal. So the court decision said that, because there is an appeal coming, it's inevitable. Then we're going to stay our decision until January 4th, unless nothing happens. And of course, more than nothing has happened. Like I said, the Colorado GOP just filed an appeal and Trump said he will. But also, Nico, I think what's going to happen is that the court's just going to ride it out, because there's effectively a January 4th, January 5th timeline here. Because now there's an appeal. January 4th and 5th is going to come by, and basically, I think the court's going to go. The mootness of it's going to be null and void, because by that time Trump's on the ballot,
right,
officially. So then there's nothing for the court to say. So I think that's ultimately what's going to say. What's going to happen is the court's going to do nothing, and basically this thing's going to expire, and Trump's going to be on the ballot. But the very fact that this is being handled this way is unbelievably scary.
Well, that's what I'm wondering. How does this not backfire on the Biden administration or the Democrats?
It vindicates Trump, doesn't it? I mean, he's been saying they're out to get me.
Look, I mean, yeah,
doesn't it?
Biden's numbers are. If you're a Democrat or if you're a strategist, and they even talk about it on these networks that have really protected Biden, in my humble opinion, and they're just saying these are horrible numbers. 28% on certain topics. I mean, just horribly, way worse than Carter. I heard one strategist, I think very wisely, just say the campaigning is, are you better off, like what Reagan did to Carter back when they ran against each other, when that election was going on. Reagan just said, are you better off 4 years ago? I mean, that's the really simple question that I think even people that don't like Trump will be open-minded, saying, look, we weren't in wars. I mean, the irony is everything, and we've said this in the show a while back, everything that they accused Trump that he would do, Biden did. The border's in shambles. International relations are horrible. We're involved in wars. There's disorder in the world. There's disorder in the country. The economy's gone to crap. I mean, literally everything they accused Trump of doing, he's gonna strip your freedoms. He's gonna be a fascist. I mean, then you have cancel this and stay here, and you can't do this, and you have to do this, and you have to shut down all this stuff that's happening. I mean, Biden's doing. And so, but that's kind of the MO of the left when you really think about it, 101. It's not what it seems like it is, because I say so. Not forget the facts. We don't want to talk logic with you. And yes means no, and no means yes. So it's really, you can't reason with that type of mindset.
And they're banking that people won't reason because people have lost the ability to reason. They believe that the United States has become soft. I mean, they believe this about their own people. There's no way they'd be able to get away with this unless they have a very low opinion of their own constituents. Where people are distracted, and to an extent, I can't blame them. I mean, we're buried in our screens. We're preoccupied about the latest source of entertainment. We follow the latest shiny object. We have lost the ability, I think. COVID shows us that we've lost the ability to think rationally. We're totally detached from our history. So the United States government is making a bet right now that their people are idiots. And I, with all due respect to our people, including myself, because I'm part of the people, they're right. Largely speaking, we have an idiotic country that is too preoccupied with self-serving pursuits.
You forgot Taylor Swift on the cover of Time.
Let's not forget Taylor Swift. I'm sorry. How dare I forget Taylor Swift? But this is where we are, and they're making, I think, a very safe bet, and they're winning this bet so far. And so, we always
they're getting a lot of help. I mean, like I said, if
Right.
media and journalism did what they were supposed to do, none of this stuff would be where it's at.
Which confirms our presumption that
Right. If corporations didn't fall for this crap with DEI and all this other stuff out there, the diversity, equity, inclusion, and these scores that are out there, and they're tripping over themselves, no matter at their own detriment. I mean, like Budweiser and all this other stuff. No matter, my DEI score is great. Yeah, but you've lost your audience. I mean, just like Hollywood. I mean, Hollywood's doing that now. You can't even qualify for an Oscar unless you have your DEI score, whatever acronym score, and you have a third of this group and a third of that group, and this. I mean, forget about great movies anymore. I mean, if you're going to go that route, I mean, even Richard Dreyfuss, who is no advocate of conservatism, said, "What are you talking about? I mean, Titanic, Jaws, whatever, Rocky." All the Godfather, all these movies would have never won. I mean, so we've lost our minds. To George, I'm bringing this up to say that it's a good bet for them because we've lost our minds and we're gripped by fear and we're addicted to being liked by certain people, at least by the loudest people, versus being credible. And we really got to get back to our foundation of logic and reasoning and critical thinking and education and understanding our history so we don't repeat it again. I mean, all this stuff is important. I mean, and of course, still have fun. I mean, it doesn't mean you have to be some stiff ass. I mean, you want to have fun too. Don't get me wrong, but we got to get back to the foundations of this country, which is pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness. Happiness doesn't mean feelings. Happiness means freedom, not feelings. It means entrepreneurship, education, property ownership, freedom to worship. All these things. It meant something to our founding fathers, and we've really gotten away from that.
And it's a government that's decided on and voted on by the people. We got to get back to those basic tenets.
Yeah.
But I liked how you framed this notion that if they're complaining about it, they're doing it. Coming back to that,
You've always said that.
This is a classic example of that. It's probably the best recent example. Here you have a woman that's been strategizing with radical activist groups. She is a former member of ACLU. Shanna Bellows in Maine. Working basically with Jenna Griswold for 2 years. And she's on video. I mean, this is the fearlessness of these individuals on video, basically talking that this is what they would be doing, essentially, looking for opportunities to keep a former president of the United States off the ballot, talking about this for 2 years on video. Dom, I don't know if we can make that video available because people are probably wondering what video am I talking about. The Midwesterner put the video out, and I'll make that available. I'll send the link.
If you didn't find it, you can put it on the Facebook, maybe. So people can look.
And there she is, admitting patently that ACLU and SPLC are working in concert to bar Trump from being on the ballot for 2 years. And here she shows up and tries to posit that has nothing to do with it. It's not like I had an axe to grind with Trump or anything ideologically. I really care about the rule of law. See, they always color it in really positive terms. This is an old communist strategy. It's authoritarian in nature, and it only works if the audience is ignorant. That only
Explain
works.
the strategy, George, because that's important. We've talked about that in 1980. We've talked about this before, but explain the communist strategy you're talking about.
Well, the communist strategy that I'm talking about specifically as it pertains to propaganda, that you basically tell people what they're really experiencing, they're not experiencing. It's the analogy of pouring down rain outside. You're looking out your window. You see a massive storm. It's lightning. You've got high winds. You probably see a funnel cloud. but you got a weatherman on television that says that your eyes deceive you, and it's actually not a cloud in the sky. It's a sunny day, and go out for a stroll. It's that analogy. And you're saying, but I'm seeing it. And they're saying, no, your eyes deceive you. This is the whole notion of gaslighting. And so this feeds into the notion that, yes, I know, I'm making an argument that Trump is assaulting our democracy, but let me truly assault democracy to save you from Trump's assault on democracy. And we all sit here and say, oh, okay, well, you're a government official, and you seem like a nice enough lady, so I'm going to believe you, despite what I know to be nonsense. And so that's only possible after a culture has been seasoned over time to accept the ridiculous. And that's what we've lost. And our educational institutions have gone right along with this. This is why I see it as a triad. You've got a government that is involved in mass propaganda. It's aided by the national media. And it's aided even further by educational institutions that prepare people from a very young age to accept this nonsense. And so what is the solution? And there is no quick solution. The solution is to retro-educate, to literally educate back. There's no other solution. And we damn better wise up to be able to do that. You can't teach people what you don't know.
I get what you're saying, George, and it's so logical. But that's like asking the Democrats to admit they're wrong about immigration. It's like
or anything. And so it's a hard ask, but maybe you can explain to us.
People in general don't like to admit they're wrong, but you're right. When it comes to this tribalistic mindset, it's a tough sell.
So can we talk about immigration coming up next after this break? You have to join us. We will be back with more on Sidebar. choice. Go to sidebartv.com.
That's a great song, by the way. Good choice, brother.
Yes, that is.
Born in
choice.
USA, Bruce Springsteen.
Yep.
What was that? Is that 85?
I don't know.
Or 84?
We'll find out. Lalo's not here. He's nice.
We have to talk about the border because we only have 30 minutes left, and there's so much that I need explained, especially since I've kind of been checked out this past week because I've been spending time with the family and not paying much attention to what's going on in the world. But obviously, things have gotten worse, not better, when it comes to the border, because all you have to do is open up your social media and you'll see more caravans forming and these trains that are just filled with men, because I haven't seen any women or kids on those trains.
Yeah, it's a lot of adult men. I mean, look, that's not a soundbite. That's not a talking point. I mean, show me the videos then. But whether it's men, women, kids, it's really irrelevant. It shouldn't be happening. Period. End of story. I just can't believe that it's embarrassing. I mean, forget about the practical side of it. There's a principle and a practical side of it. I mean, it's embarrassing that the superpower cannot stop people from coming. Because you got Egypt that said to Palestinians, don't you dare come over here. We're going to put everything we can to make sure that, why doesn't, that's another topic, why Egypt and Jordan and all these other countries surrounding Palestine and the Gaza don't want them in their country. Yeah. But all I'm saying is they can stop people from coming into their country. We can't stop people coming into our country.
We can't stop them, but I think it's more like we won't stop them.
No, I'm just saying what the talking point is. No, absolutely. I mean, are we going to say that if they all had high capacity long rifles and bombs and bazookas and whatever and tanks, that I don't know how we can process them, I guess. We would do nothing to stop it.
Right.
But obviously, the retort to that is that's not the same situation, but it's similar. It's in the same galaxy for sure, because you don't know who's in that group. We know that people on the terror watch list are on that group. That there's a safety aspect of a sovereignty aspect of it, but then there's a practical side. Is who's going to take care of these people? Where are they going to get jobs? Who's going to feed them? Where are they going to go to school? Who's going to take care of their medical needs? Where are they going to stay? I mean, is that what's going to happen? We're going to continue to fill up cities, and now New York. Who wants to go to? Can you imagine if you own that hotel? The hotels that they're filling up with illegal immigrants in there, and
4 and 5-star hotels and convention centers.
Completely.
That's right. And that's not 67,000 earlier. I didn't want to interrupt you.
Was it more?
But I think it's over 100,000.
Okay.
In fact, I think it's in the vicinity of around 110 to 120,000
in New York alone.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, the numbers are staggering. I mean, they're just
250,000 this month.
286,000.
Well, there you go.
This month, it's a new record.
Forget about the gotaways.
Yeah.
Or the people that are the coyotes are bringing in here. Yes, I remember them. That idiot. She said when someone used the term coyote, and people on the border understand what that means.
Yeah.
What do you mean a coyote? I mean that just shows how disconnected people were back then. Which they were speaking out of their ass, complaining about something that didn't relate to them, and now it relates to them, and so now they have an opinion about it, but just typical.
So,
no, but
please. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to follow up on what you said earlier. This is an invitation. This is they're placating this. They want us to become, what do you call it, Nico? The new normal.
Yep.
There's nothing new about it. This is what's normal. We had just this week reported Department of Homeland Security Director Mayorkas and Secretary of State Blinken went to Mexico to meet with Mexico President Obrador to talk about what they could do regarding the hordes of so-called migrants coming across the border. I love how everybody calls illegal immigration never showed up in the talks, by the way, not once. Not once. It's all migration. It's all migrants, sort of, neutral to positive terms. But supposedly to talk about these huge spikes across the border. Apparently, in recent week to 10 days or so, we've had to literally shut down some of our ports, and it's affected trade. And it sounded like Blinken and Mayorkas were going to use that as a bargaining chip. Hey, we had to close some of these ports because we've seen these spikes. What can we do about that? Now, our position should be we need to stop this. We've had 8 million people come across, 6 million that we know about, 2 million gotaways, right? 6 million detentions, 2 million gotaways. And this is just the numbers. These are estimates. We believe actually that it's north of that because the Border Patrol is saying it's north of that. They just don't know how much. So that's a staggering number of people in the last 3 years. And so you'd think the United States would go there to say, this has to stop. This needs to stop immediately or else. That wasn't our position at all. The whole thing was shrouded in terms of cooperation. The White House then released the statement And it said, quote, the delegations discussed the benefit of regularizing the situation of long-term undocumented Hispanic migrants and DACA recipients, comma, who are a vital part of the U.S. economy and society. Listen to that language. This is a statement from the White House post-meeting. The delegations discussed the benefit of regularizing the situation of long-term undocumented Hispanic migrants and DACA recipients. Regularizing.
What is that word? What does that mean?
So the scope of the meeting was, hey man, we can't handle these spikes. Let's talk about normalizing. Let's talk about regularizing. Can we please have regularized migration? And Obrador, that's our concern. Obrador's concern is that we address the poverty in places like Cuba and Venezuela, decidedly left-wing regimes. There's got to be room for cooperation in the United States, he says. What's he asking for? He's asking for money. Please send them money. Invest in their infrastructure. Send them development money. Because you see, if we can send them more and more millions, and by the way, on top of the tens and tens of millions we've already spent that have been spent on something that we don't know, completely squandered by rogue regimes, let's send them more money, Nico, because if we can do that, then maybe we can develop businesses. Maybe we can bring order to their society. Maybe more infrastructure. And maybe in that environment, people will all of a sudden wish to stay. Well, if we can just send more money.
I think the data shows very convincingly that this is not Hispanics coming over. These are not Mexicans coming over. I mean, you're talking about people from Africa, from China, from the Middle East. I mean, all over, people on the terror watch list, as we know, and we have no idea. I mean, look, 2 million gotaways. Even the ones that we're catching and they're being shipped all over the place, it's not like they're being vetted out properly. I mean, how many times is the FBI going to warn us recently that there's a heightened state of alert, of be diligent, that there could be some type of attack in our borders, and we're not. And when are we going to believe them? And where do you think that's coming from? I mean, in a thought exercise, let's just do a thought experiment. So we're the United States. All these people are coming in through Mexico. So to me, Mexico is a co-conspirator in this invasion because they're not doing anything to stop it. And they're not being good partners. So we stop it. I mean, with a wall, with army, let's go Egypt. You're not coming in no matter what. Stay there. Okay, Mexico, you have all these people. You still want them in your country? Then they're going to stop bringing them as a funnel through their country. They're going to stop being a co-conspirator or at least involved in this process because they don't care because they're going to us and they're not staying there. But when they start feeling the pain, I mean, then maybe they'll do something about it. Then we start negotiations when you have an upper hand. You don't.
What an important point. That needs to be the position that we come in on. Look,
yes, that's what I would do.
We have trade. We have individuals here. These are illegal aliens that have come in here. We have foreign nationals that have come in, and they earn a ton of money, and they send that money back to their foreign nations, American money. We know this is a huge benefit. That's the kind of stuff we ought to be putting on the table as a bargaining chip. And what are we using as a bargaining chip? The regularized migration. In fact, Reuters wrote that Obrador, quote unquote, highlighted the commitment of President Biden to pursue regular, orderly, and secure migration.
Well, if you're saying that just means legal immigration, then so be it. I mean, if that's what that means.
Regular, orderly,
sound like
and secure migration. But the word legal isn't there. Illegal didn't come up once.
Well, illegal or legal is not in there. But that's the play on words is my point. Because to me, definitions matter. Forget the flowery, politically correct BS. I mean, what is those definitions? What does that mean? I would stop right there and say, what does that mean? Because it's got to mean something. I want to know it. Now, I get your point, George. I mean, this is a fancy way.
What does it mean? What's going on right now is what it means. I mean, this is my point about.
But this is not orderly, is my point.
Exactly, and it's the disorderly part that they don't like. It's making them look bad, frankly, because this is an electoral issue in 2024.
Yeah, it is.
But Nico, I'd like to go a step further because I think it isn't. We always say he's not acting alone. Not only do we have faith-based and non-governmental.
Who's not acting
alone? The Biden
alone?
administration is not acting alone here in terms of leaving the border open and opening the country to truly hordes of illegal aliens. They're doing this with a lot of help. They really are. And they're not just doing it with Mexico's full cooperation, but they're doing it with the help of the United States Supreme Court. And I want to just pause here for a moment. You and I chatted a little bit before the show, because I believe this is ultimately the root of the issue. The United States Supreme Court has given the federal government cover. And Biden has given cover, and he's allowed to do what he's allowed to do ultimately
Talk about
under
the
the
case you're
cover
talking
of
about.
law. We have to go back to 2012 and notice how these meetings use really sort of unfettered illegal immigration anywhere in the United States as a bargaining chip, where the federal government's basically saying, sure, we'll allow this to continue if you don't make us look bad. Because that's basically the essence of this past week's meeting, which is unbelievably pathetic, if not illegal. But it is legal. The United States Supreme Court in 2012 in Arizona versus the U.S. took up a case where Arizona had a law that basically said you couldn't have illegal immigration in the state. And so the law prosecuted individuals charged with that. And this came up before the United States Supreme Court. In a 5-4 ruling, Anthony Kennedy explained that Arizona's law was unconstitutional. In other words, Arizona's law to enforce state sovereignty, its inherent state sovereignty rights, which are constitutional,
Right.
was unconstitutional because it impinged on the federal government's priorities with regard to negotiating international relations. So basically, the United States Supreme Court said that every border is an international border. And the federal government has to have a miraculous, conjectured constitutional right to use it as an international bargaining chip in its negotiations. And since then, the understanding, the false understanding, is that it's unconstitutional for any state to exert sovereignty rights as it pertains to illegal immigration. And that's BS. That's not true. And so I love that SB 4 in the state of Texas has been passed by the legislature, signed into law by the governor. And I think on this issue, Governor Abbott is an unquestionable hero. This needs to come before the United States Supreme Court. I wouldn't be surprised if they did this knowing they were going to get sued so that it could end up before the court so that this can get redeliberated. And
This
we
is
desperately need
Talk
that.
about that.
complicated a subject to just go to this break and not explain all of this, because you would think that the government's got our back, but then the Department of Justice threatening to sue Texas for the very reason of us trying to protect it. We are going to take a break and we will be right back. Radio. And we will continue the after show. Just go to sidebartv.com and you'll find the platform of your choice. Okay, let's go back to this situation. U.S. Department of Justice threatening to sue to stop that new Texas law that allows police to arrest people suspected of illegally crossing the border, unless Governor Abbott just backs off enforcing that law. It seems counterproductive to protecting our borders. But as you said, this is a federal law that the federal government protect our borders, but they're not doing that. So I need a little bit of an explanation on why do you think Governor Abbott even did this in the first place?
Nico, I don't know. And Karen, I don't know. I read the DOJ's letter suing the state of Texas. And in the body of the letter, they brought up the 2012 case as somehow constitutional precedent. And I'm thinking to myself, why is that? And then when you go back to the 2012 ruling, it's a 5-4 decision, Nico.
Right.
5-4 decision, and Scalia's dissent was absolutely fantastic. A lot's changed in 10 years, as you know. Kennedy's no longer on the court. He voted for it. Breyer's no longer on the court. He voted for it. Of course, Ruth Bader Ginsburg is no longer on the court. Who was it? Man, Clarence Thomas dissented. Alito dissented. Scalia dissented. And Scalia's dissent, and I think is fantastic. And then he calls into question this whole notion that states don't have inherent sovereignty rights. What are you doing? Are you kidding me? You're basically erasing the states.
Right.
And the idea that we are where we are, and I think that the court has since shirked its responsibility, and the damage that has happened in this country as a result of basically not just erasing states' rights, but truly erasing the citizen. This is unconscionable. It's immoral.
To me, it's equivalent. It's equivalent to a citizen who says, I depend on the government to ensure that I'm not going to be assaulted, murdered, sexually assaulted, things of this nature. Government enforce laws, law enforcement, make sure you keep us safe, and then for whatever reason, they don't do it. And then they say, and you can't defend yourself. That's not a one-for-one, but to me, it's in that arena, where the state is saying, Texas is saying, well, first of all, we disagree that it's a federal issue. I mean, yes, exactly on George's point. I mean, I think the Constitution, there's a colorable, very strong argument, constitutional argument that the sovereignty is with each state. But regardless, you're not doing it. So I can't defend myself. I have no right to self-defense.
Exactly right.
I mean, so what's the answer? You're not enforcing these immigration laws that you say you're responsible for, but you're not doing your job, or you're doing it crappy. So what do? Do I just continue to get assaulted? And this is an assault on it's assault on the country, by the way. Obviously, when you have Eric Adams and the governor of New York and all these other people, and Chicago mayor and everybody kind of changing their tune now. So it's assaulting the whole country, but definitely Arizona and Texas. So no right to self-defense. I mean, that's really the argument. That's the argument I would make, at least in a more crafty way. But that's why this is so important to me.
It absolutely is. It's staggering to me that a state doesn't have a right to ask basic self-defense questions, or ask questions like, hey, we've got 8 million people in here over the last 3 years. A lot of them are faux asylum seekers. Like you guys just said, most of them are single military-aged males. We know from reports that have come out from the Border Patrol that we've got criminals. We have many of them on the international terror list from more than 160 countries, and many of them are hostile to the United States. And so the idea that Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution can't be invoked and say, this is an invasion. We're basically erasing basic citizens' rights here. And who said this was okay? So what is constitutional is somehow deemed unconstitutional, and what is unconstitutional is somehow deemed constitutional.
That's just what we were talking about earlier.
And that's why I think SB 4, may God grant us the opportunity to have that come before the court, Nico, to be redeliberated on its merit, because it's insane. States have a right to exercise their inherent sovereignty rights to say, you don't belong here. And here's why. States have a right to do that. They have a right to weigh in on illegal presence. And the idea that a state can't even raise that, that's nuts. And I believe, I don't see, I mean, do we really believe that the legislature and Abbott didn't know they were going to be sued? Literally 2 seconds from the second they started enforcing this law. So they were given, I think, till January 3rd. I think they were given till January 3rd to respond. And of course, thank God for Abbott's response. He basically said, you can kiss my ass. See you in court. And that's the right answer. We need this to come before SCOTUS. At the time, Roberts went with Kennedy.
Interesting. I didn't realize that.
But Roberts can see, fast forward that, he can see where we are now. And so...
That's a big deal. The fact that Thomas and Alito and Roberts...
Yes.
And Roberts sided with the other side, so he was the tiebreaker against, changed everything.
It really did. And I just think that the consequences to the country are just breathtaking. Nico said something that's really important. I don't want to lose it. I'd like to go back, and I'd like to quote directly from Thomas Jefferson, if I can. Jefferson said, quote, "I think to myself that we have more machinery of government than is necessary. Too many parasites living on the labor of the industrious." And here's what he said that I think gives me great pause. "A government big enough to supply everything you need is big enough to take everything you have." Wow. A government big enough to supply everything you need is big enough to take everything that you have. And so this conversation is really about mechanisms, the machinery by which the government takes away everything you have. In fact, the machinery by which government determines that you're irrelevant. And that's ultimately what this is about. Coming out of this meeting where Obrador, in his words, said that Biden has committed to regular migration and to investing in development programs in the Americas. I don't remember the United States citizenry saying that was okay. The United States Supreme Court, in an insane ruling in 2012, has now given total purview to the federal government, now a left-wing regime, to use our state sovereignty as a bargaining chip to basically dissolve its own citizenry right now. They're using Mexico and they're using the quote-unquote Americas to make the American citizen not just invisible, but outright extinct. And the court has given it cover, and thank God for it.
But as if any of these people coming over are being, brought into this country with the right mindset. They're not being integrated into our country. Mm-hmm. They don't understand the culture here. They don't understand the American way. They don't understand the history. They don't understand the Constitution. They don't understand freedom. They understand, their definition of freedom. They don't understand entrepreneurship. They don't understand any of the things that built up this country, this melting pot idea, and what our founding fathers really believed for our citizens. They don't understand that. So they're not being integrated into our country. How do you think that's going to work out? I mean, look, it's not being reported like it should, but you're seeing assaults, attacks. You're seeing a lot of stuff.
I was just going to say that as lawbreakers, they're given priority over the American people. It's like, wait a second.
So you break a law to get into this country.
That's right.
And then you don't get prosecuted for other, it's not a carte blanche statement. I'm not trying to paint with a broad brush. Every DA is different. But I wish people need to play this out. Just like George, what a great point. I'm glad you pointed that out about Roberts. Now he's played it out. I really pray and hope that he thinks this through, and that somebody's talking in his ear if he hasn't realized it himself. Like, damn. I mean, I was the deciding factor on this, and look how now it wasn't an issue until now, but here we are. 10 to 12, 13 years later, 12 years later, look how this played out. I didn't do enough critical thinking and be careful of this world that we're creating, because now he's having to live in it with everybody else. So I really hope and pray that he course corrects, and that he leads the court to correct the 2012, because it's not in the Constitution, George. You're right, but Supreme Court precedent is strong. I mean, that's the whole separation of church and state trickled in to that way. It's not in the Constitution either. We talk about it all the time. It's from a letter from President Thomas in 1801 to the Dansbury Baptists, saying that we're going to separate church and state, but the context was we're going to keep the government away from infringing on our right to worship, not the other way around. And that made its way into court precedent in Supreme Court rulings that were wrong at the time. They didn't look at the history and the constitutional intent. And then here it is, this whole separation of church and state. So that's what happened here.
Beautifully said. It's the play out it really is, right? It's the play out rule here that we're praying ultimately happens, because if you look at Kennedy's ruling, he did it out of concerns for quote unquote international stability. That was his concern. And now, as you said, we can play it out after 11 years. And I think that this is a wonderful opportunity for the court to basically survey the wreckage and say, I don't really think that making immigration control an exclusively federal prerogative has led to stability. It's absolute chaos, and it's hurting people, tangibly so. Never mind, getting back to Jefferson's quote, that you've got parasites that are feeding on the industrious. And not only the federal government doing that, but they're encouraging people to come in and continue to do that off citizens, foreign nationals. This is out of control.
I think we're going to wrap up, but I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked you before we even got on the air. Is it possible that Trump can get into office? Because how else is this going to stop? Even if you hate him, how else is this going to stop?
What do you mean? How else is what going to stop?
The border problem.
Well, it's not going to stop under Biden. I mean, whether it's Trump or whether it's whatever Republican, it's not going to stop under Biden. So, I mean, regardless of I just think people have a choice. They have a real choice to make, and they have to really think about it. If they're prayerful people, pray about it, whatever, how their process works. But this is not going to stop. There's no indication that Biden's going to course correct on this. He's not going to do what Bill Clinton did. He's not going to do what other people did. He's not going to course correct. And so in this new year, which we will wish people a happy new year, hope you can join us on the after show for a little while longer. But do check your inventory, see if you can talk to people more. Think about how you can be bolder about having real meaningful and respectful conversations that can shift the needle and make a difference in our country. God bless you guys. I really pray a very blessed and prosperous new year over you and your family. And God bless our country.
George, you were just talking about this immigration. What was it called? Immigration and
the
Reform.
Immigration Reform and Control Act of 1986. I'm laughing because it's done the exact opposite. And I wish I could blame a Democrat, but that's one of my favorite presidents, Ronald Reagan.
Well, Reagan did that one, and he did the whole vaccine issue too.
In 1986.
Yeah, wait, I don't even know. Tell me about that. Tell me.
Reagan. Look, if you got to call balls and strikes, Reagan signed the bill, vaccine injury compensation fund type situation where big pharma is exempt from lawsuit, and so big pharma cannot be sued, as we know. We've talked about on the show many times before.
Still so
for vaccine injuries, which we know are real, and so they have this immunity to where, and their argument was, well, then people are going to get sick, and we're going to keep getting sued because they were getting sued, and because people were getting injured. And then, like any other drug, I mean, if a drug is not up to par and doesn't go through the 4 phases,
they pull it out.
Yeah, the double-blind placebo process and the 4 phases of testing, they pull it out of circulation. I mean, like Vioxx and other things. But when it came to vaccines, they made a push. Reagan signed that bill in '86, and then from 1989 on, we can see some. You can just look at the data and make up your own mind. So it was that in this immigration issue, this amnesty, right? Not amnesty. What was it? The immigration bill.
Immigration Reform and Control Act.
Yeah, those two things that Reagan arguably, and look, there was a lot of criticism in his second term about whether he had dementia and he was, wasn't as active. Alzheimer's, yeah. There you go. And so, which is real. I mean, and I think there's a case to be made for that. Unfortunately, it's a horrible thing to go through. But yeah, those two things, I'm not pleased of what Reagan did.
And you can see the situation, not just with regard to vaccines, which I hope we can dedicate. I'd love to dedicate a whole hour to that. My goodness, we could certainly fill up an hour on that issue. But as it pertains to immigration, I was just sharing with you and Nico, Karen, that we can seriously see a marked change for the worse since 1986. You got the Castro brothers out there saying that Texas is now a purple state. Or if it isn't a purple state, it's on the eve of becoming a purple state. And I don't know that I can disagree with them. I just don't know that I can disagree with them. Remember, when when Reagan signed that into law in 1986, the boatload of illegal aliens was in California, his home state. And look what's happened to California. There's an interesting dynamic from about 1900 to 2020 that California has had a history of being about 50-50 between Republican and Democrat votes, if you will, party-wise. And that's radically changed. Radically changed. And I'm thinking in the state of Texas, I think 9 out of 13 presidential elections, if you look maybe over several decades, have been mostly Republican, and that's in danger of changing as well. And why is that?
I don't know. Why is that? Why is that? Because
yeah. I'm asking rhetorically.
Yeah, I know. It doesn't make sense though if things continue the way they are, and to me, it's horrible. I can't figure out why people would still. I want to meet those 23 people, or 23% of the people that still think Biden's doing a good job. Like, who are they?
I'm assuming some of those are the elites. I mean, they aren't really affected by what Biden. There's some people that just are not affected by the decisions because they live in a bubble and they have an ungodly amount of money. And I'm not saying that's 23% of them. I have no idea. And some people are just delusional, to be honest with you. They're so ingrained in this political tribalism, and maybe they've just been so destabilized in their thinking and delusional that, I mean, look, we always bring up Yuri Bezmenov. George talked about, kind of referenced it earlier, these 4 stages to ideological subversion the interview from 1984 that we've posted before, I know, in the past. You really need to watch it, and watch the one that's like 9 or 10 minutes long. It's from a longer interview. And he talks about these 4 stages of ideological subversion where you don't have to shoot a bullet. I mean, he talks about demoralization. They used to go into this. He was a defector from a Russian defector,
former Russia operative.
They're going to these different countries and they're taking over. And the first step is demoralization. And he talked about in '84 that it takes 15 to 20 years to do that, to sufficiently demoralize a society where you're working from media to Hollywood to news to music. You work in the schools and academia. It's an all hands on deck kind of synergistic movement to demoralize. Now, he said in '84, which I thought was interesting in that interview, was he felt in 1984, I don't know if there's any irony in whether it was 1984 that they're doing this interview, but from the book George Orwell, but that our country was sufficiently demoralized in '84. In '84, I mean, let that sink in. We're in 2024 now. So then next he says destabilization. He talks about that as where you destabilize the economy, foreign relations, defense systems, things of this nature. He says that takes 2 to 5 years to do that. Man, Biden's been in office 3 years. But I mean, it was long before that, don't get me wrong. And then number 3, crisis. Now, back then, during the '84 interview, obviously they didn't have the internet and social media the way we did today. He says it would take somewhere around 6 weeks to destabilize, to initiate this crisis. Now, forget 6 weeks, it takes 6 minutes with social media and how things can spread so fast. But think about that. And then this is the word that George talked about earlier. Then he says after stage 4 is once you've done all those things, demoralize, destabilize, crisis, then you have this normalization. The talking of, this is just the new normal. And then many times the new normal comes with a violent change in power, can last indefinitely, things of this nature, and there's this force. This is the normal, and you're going to like it. It's for your own good type deal. But we've been normalized, and then there's a portion of people that say that's just the way things are now. The mask, people thought that was going to be the new normal. Vaccine cards, they thought that was going to be the new normal. The government tell you to shut down your schools and your businesses. That was going to be the new normal. You're just going to have to do without these products. Sorry, we can't get them to you. Supply chain issues. That's the new normal. Immigration. Now we're here. I was trying to give you context. Now immigration. This is just the new normal. Right. This is from their playbook. This is not even. Go back, watch that. If you can find it, Dom, and post it. It's a 9-minute portion of it because there's a longer Yuri Bezmenov, 1984 interview. I don't remember.
I think he was former KGB.
KGB, yes, he was. He was former KGB. Yuri Bezmenov. Interesting.
And
scary.
And you could see it. He was in the middle of it, 1984. The act, the Reagan Amnesty Act, which is really what it was, that basically legalized about 3 million people in California overnight. and it was supposed to have some teeth in the sense that it also required you to go through some tests in order to be able to establish permanent residency in the country. You know, there were some requirements, and that was stalled by Tip O'Neill. I think it was obstructed, so that the amnesty stuff got through, but all the other stuff didn't. And you could just see it. I mean, you could see the door getting wider and wider and wider. And so this is in 1986, and then with the ruling in 2012, it's just a perfect storm. And here we are. And so we this is what I mean. We can't, you know, you can't get back to normalcy through force. God forbid. We gotta do the hard work and work our way back. This didn't happen overnight. We have to work our way back.
But
and get back to constitutional ideals.
Don't you think in any other time besides the one we're in right now, you would think with what's going on that Americans would say, the Democrats are just crippling their chances at the polls, whether it's the national polls, state polls, because of what they're allowing to happen, whether it's the illegals coming over or whatever. But that's not the case. And there's no indication from the Biden administration, because of their new normal attitude, that any of this is going to be a problem for them at the polls. It's just like, well, that's just the way it is.
The argument, the theory is because they're going to cheat, right? So you don't have to worry about it if you're going to cheat because you already know the outcome. Now, I don't know about that. I'm not taking that position. I'm just telling you what I've heard the argument is.
Yeah.
But it is a question. Why aren't they? Because it seems like everybody else is concerned about it.
Yeah.
I mean, Democratic strategists, pollsters, people that are looking at stuff. I saw an article that came out. I just saw the headline that they think certain Senate seats are going to flip to Republican on this time around. I hope and pray.
Yeah, but we've heard that before.
We have. Well, look, I never was for the red wave thing that happened. That was a letdown. I thought that was way overdoing it. Yes, things were crappy. I think people let their guard down. They just assumed a lot of things from whether pundits and all this other stuff. I just say, look, this is heading in this direction. You can't let your guard down. I think, whether people want to believe it or not, I think that the Roe v. Wade overturn energized people, certain people that maybe wouldn't have voted or would have stayed home because of everything else that people thought that they were right about saying that were affecting people, and then they made an emotional vote versus a logical vote, and they spited their face for their nose or whatever that saying is. So look, I'll let other experts argue that out. I'm just a schmuck with an opinion, but this here, the writing is on the wall. People are unhappy. People are devastated by this economy. Mm-hmm. I think the rise, my humble opinion, I think the rise in alternative media sources has been a blessing, and which is why they wanted to shut people down. It's been a blessing. If it wasn't for all this censorship and fact-checking bullshit during COVID, we wouldn't have gone through COVID. I really believe that. I can't promise you, but I really believe that.
Or Trump losing, possibly.
Well, yes. Because a lot of people said their vote was altered if they would have heard about this Hunter laptop deal, and then these 50 special agents or whatever experts that said that was they were wrong. So they were either horribly incompetent or they're liars. But there's no accountability. They're not shamed.
Right.
With significant consequences. We had reports in the aftermath that some 17% of the individuals who voted for Biden would not have voted for Biden had they known that.
That's a game changer right there.
My goodness gracious! When we're talking about across those swing states, there was a difference of less than 50,000 votes, so that could have easily turned the election. True election interference.
Yeah.
State sanctioned election interference, and where are the consequences for that? There's never any consequence.
None.
Look, let me because these two issues are tied together, Nico. This idea of, Karen's saying, why aren't these guys concerned? And then you saying that there's the rumor out there that they're going to cheat. So if they're going to cheat, who cares? They're going to put their thumbs on the scale, so it doesn't matter. That there's evidence to suggest that the cheat looks different. Remember, we've said from the very beginning, because last time we were talking about mail-in ballots, we were talking about lawfare in the era of COVID in 2020. Mark Elias, the infamous Democrat lawyer who filed a boatload of lawsuits to change state election laws on the eve of an election, and he was largely successful. And Democrats are far better at that than Republicans are. So there's no question that had significant impact on how votes were counted. We had
Elections go way beyond the election day. They're still counting votes. Votes are appearing. It was an absolute cluster. And in that fog, it's very easy to cheat. And since we're only talking about a difference of less than 50,000 votes between Trump and Biden in those swing states, you can see how a difference of maybe 1% or 2 with those kinds of illegal activities, technically, they're illegal. You can't be doing that kind of stuff. And yet legislatures just kind of sat aside and let it happen. You can see why cheating can happen, and in my view, did happen in swing states. That said, I don't think we're going to see the exact same strategy. I think this immigration situation is going to be much more front and center, and it's much more insidious and difficult to stop because it has the cover of law. There's a report from and I have it here in front of me because I wanted to confirm it. The Office of Immigration Program Evaluation is leading the ICE Secure Docket Card Project. There's an announcement that illegal aliens are going to be furnished with photo ID cards in 2024 as they come across the border. And so what you're going to have here is a legalization of illegal immigration. Yeah. And the federal government is facilitating it and now providing them.
Well, then forget about it. Forget about the election.
So you see the idea. Remember, it was if you talking about the replacement theory, then you're a conspiracy nut. But it's happening before our very eyes. I mean, we are changing demographics substantially. Yeah. The state of California is front and center exhibit number one. We're changing them. These demographics are not what they used to be just a few years ago. Okay, it's common sense. It's obvious, but the government will tell you that you're racist. That's it. That's the answer.
That's where you got to push back. I mean, look, to George's point earlier, and to your question, I think, Karen, when you think about Argentina, and they voted in that. I mean, I love his interviews. I love his boldness. I mean, the guy's a nut job, but it sounds like, but it's a needed nut job. I mean, because it's nuts what's happening on the other side.
Yep.
He's like I guess he's our Trump. I don't know.
Right.
But so a third world country like Argentina was able to count 32 million votes in one day.
Yeah.
Paper ballots. Almost 100%.
I know.
In one day. Paper vote, 32 million. But Arizona couldn't count 2.5 million votes in a week. To George's point, look, that's worth a question. I'm not saying you have to be a conspiracy theorist. I'm not saying you have to say, oh, the election was stolen. I haven't seen 2,000 Mules. I mean, I heard it's good. I heard it makes you think. I like D'Souza, Dinesh. Overall, I like him a lot. I think he's very articulate. He's educated, he's smart. He understands history. I mean, he's a very good debater. And so I like him. So I'm not criticizing or supporting that. Have you seen it, George? I haven't seen it.
I have.
Okay. Well, I haven't seen it. So all I'm saying is why is that not a legitimate question? A third world country can count 32 million ballots, paper ballots in one day, and this superpower of a country, and Arizona can't count 2.5 million in a week? That's a problem. I mean, just as a regardless of who won. That's a problem for the Democrat and for the Republican. It's a problem for us. So this is I think some of the points that we're trying to make, and there's going to be different strategies. I'm assuming. I'm always cautious until we have hard evidence. That's just the way my mind works. I whether it's Hunter, I apply this to everybody.
That's right.
I mean, you got to be that.
You need to.
Yeah, due process, fundamental fair play. We got to have order. We have to have evidence. We have to have objective evidence. If it's subjective, say it is. If it's your opinion, say it is. You can have expert witnesses all day long, whether they're credible or not, it's another story. When they're subject to cross-examination, that gets vetted out before the jury of your peers. But I always wait for evidence. So, but this is legitimate stuff to talk about. Election integrity. That's the conversation. It's not election integrity for Republicans.
Yeah.
It's not election integrity for Democrats. Just election integrity, period.
That is one thing that scares me, and it reminds me of a conversation that I just recently had with, I'm assuming a millennial. And I think in my mind, without any, science or facts, that they are probably one of the hardest hit groups because their jobs aren't paying to keep up with inflation. They're being pushed out of the housing market, which typically would have been like the piggy bank for your old age if you didn't have Social Security or anything like that because of the interest rates. And I was talking to this one guy, and he said, we've got to tell our parents, sorry, it's just not going to happen like it happened for you. We're not going to be able to get a house. We're not going to be able to get that high-paying job and have that retirement and Social Security, because Social Security is probably not, we're paying for your Social Security because we're so far in debt. And in my mind, I said, well, who would you like to be president, Trump or Biden? And he said, well, honestly, neither of them, because they're both on the take. They're both bad. They're both, they don't represent who I am. And I thought to myself, well, that sounds like a great plan, but today you've got to have somebody. You can't
I wouldn't have let him have that out. And thank you for bringing that up, Karen. I appreciate you using that as an example. But say, well, let's compare them. Let's whiteboard this thing.
Yep.
So what do you mean they're both the same? They're both on the take. Look, I mean, we've been very critical of Trump on, Operation whatever with the vaccines. And
by the way, I did exactly what you said.
Good.
Please,
I'm
please talk it out.
Warp speed, warp speed, and all this other crap. I mean, so again, we need to call balls and strikes on everybody. That's where this objective standard that we need to have, and this thing called evidence and facts needs to prevail. And this thing, anti-censorship, needs to prevail, meaning free thought, free expression, free speech, things of this nature. I would really step on. What do you mean they're both the same? So let's just talk about, well, tough shit. These are your choices, number one. But aside from that, how do you tell me what you mean by they're both the same? Because you said something. What does that mean? They're the same. They have the exact same results. Are you saying
they're both on the take?
Okay, well then I want evidence of that.
I'd love to know what that means.
I mean, even evidence of Biden being on the take. I mean, I understand all the investigations and all the weird, shady stuff, and all that needs to be vetted out through a proper process. But they're on the take. But I want to talk about results. I would say from immigration to the border. I mean, that same thing. Sorry, to the economy, to inflation, to home ownership, to get everything. To international affairs and foreign conflicts and safety. Do you feel safer in this country? What about the culture in this country? Are things the same? I want to play that out. I would play that out with them. What did he say?
Throwing in, the conversation ended abruptly. Okay. But don't you think, and I was thinking this afterwards, throwing in a third candidate like Kennedy is just going to mess things up more?
I don't know. I mean, there's different theories on who that's going to hurt more.
Like there are women that are just never going to vote for Trump. There are young people that are never going to vote for Trump. Never, even if they're living in their parents' basement.
What about those Democrats that can never vote Republican but can't stand Biden? And they're out there too. I mean, so I don't know. Maybe George has some numbers and he's got probably a better opinion than I do about it. I don't know. All I know is that when Bobby was in the Democrat primary, he was polling anywhere between 15 and 20% of Democrats.
Right.
Now, do the Democrats, those 15 or 20%, do they say we're with Bobby no matter what? Or do they say we're with Democrats no matter what, but Bobby was the better choice? I don't know. I don't have that answer. And I don't know if there's any polling.
Or we don't want Trump, we don't want Biden, so we're stuck with somebody else.
We've seen slippage in those demographics that you're talking about away from Biden. In fact, at where we sit right now, the approval rating is always important because people make the argument, well, it's not that they love Biden, it's that they hate Trump.
Yeah.
But if you look at Biden's approval rating, it sits somewhere around 39 to 40% if you take an average of the polls. That's lower than it was for Trump at this time. Trump was at about 43% at this time in his presidency. So that's a pretty significant shift. 18 to 29-year-olds are shifting for Trump, and you've got minorities that are shifting for Trump in big numbers. You've seen double-digit slippage away from Biden, and that's dramatic. And I don't know voting-wise how Democrats can survive that kind of slippage. I don't think they can. And so I think it's looking more and more dismal for Biden. Thank goodness, if you're a conservative. The idea that this individual says they're not any different. I mean, are you kidding me? I would have loved to ask. Give me an example of how they're exactly the same. Please, I'm waiting to hear. Give me an example. Just go down category by category.
And I get what you're saying, but I think it's a distrust of Democrats, Republicans, government because of what's happening. I mean,
yeah, but both on a take is not an answer.
I
agree.
Yeah.
What's an answer? It's not a credible answer.
Right. I mean, we didn't get to finish the conversation because I don't know what happened, but I was just thinking. He's like a lot of Americans that they don't know all the facts.
Yeah.
And so they distrust everyone that's in government.
For a young person, just little things may help. Little examples, little illustrations. The presidential salary is around $400,000 a year. And so I guess I would ask them, how many presidents in the history of the country have ever volunteered to give up their salary?
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity. Yeah. And I don't know what he would have said, but I said, well, I can think of one. And it's the same guy you're saying was on the take. I mean, $400,000 a year over 4 years adds up. It's $1.6 million. I'll take it. Shoot.
Well, hold on, but it's a net 1.6 million because he's not paying for anything from food to travel to vacations and nothing. I mean, it's a net 1.6 million. That's. But number two, if you look at their net worth of every president in recent history that has gone into office and gotten out of office, and then where they're at today.
What you're going to say?
Trump.
Great minds think alike.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I mean, that's evidence. I mean, that's evidence to me.
Those are practical,
What's he taking?
tangible, verifiable things. It's not a matter of who's conservative, who's liberal. Those are just objectively factual. And I think it says something about priorities. That's all. And so if you think they're both on the take, I don't know. It doesn't seem like...
But I think that, I'm thinking back now that maybe this conversation ended quickly because a lot of young people do not like confrontation and they don't want to go back and forth and talk about facts. And I wonder if that probably wasn't, I'll be right back, I got a call, because they
young people. I'll use a training example. Young people like to hit the heavy bag and the speed bag. They don't like to spar.
So true.
So they don't mind
So
throwing
true.
punches. So they don't
shadow boxing.
Yeah, they like to hit the heavy bag and the speed bag, and look how good I look on the speed bag. I hit the head bag. But then look at the spar. Hold on, I got to defend myself. I got to see if I really can.
That just
perform
reminds me of that girl that walked up to Ben Shapiro and she said, "Free Palestine," and then drops the mic and runs off.
Yeah,
and he's like, "What part? What part are you talking about?" Yeah. She's out of the room. That's the end of it. It's like, okay, I get it. They don't want to go back and forth with facts.
And I think that's an issue. That's an issue in the polling. If you go back to that New York Times Siena poll from about a month ago, that issue came up, that there was slippage away from Biden, from younger voters, because they didn't like how he was handling the Israel-Hamas war. Now, you might say, yay, but the problem is that they thought that Biden was too pro-Israel. See, again, so...
Wow.
So they're basically doing the right thing for the wrong reason. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's an opportunity for, again, it comes back to education. It's an opportunity for an education. A lot of people are just saying, a lot of these kids are just saying things they've heard in school, they hear from their peers, and they're bullshit. And it's just a wonderful opportunity to just pause. And I like to ask questions. I like to ask for specific examples. And I think, you question the assumptions. Nico knows I've been saying that for years. It's just a good strategy to question the premises or the assumptions in a question, right? Mm-hmm. And question those before you even get into a tit for tat. Ask. Well, let me go back to your question. I want to prove that I've heard your question, and I'm not just interested in giving you my soundbite. I want to go back to your question, and you said this in your question. Help me understand. Give me an example, and then watch them. And there's nothing factual there, and you watch them trip over it, and hopefully you can graciously say, well, you're not able to think of anything because frankly there isn't an example. Where did you hear that? Like, where did you get that information? And then you start talking about news sources and that kind of stuff.
Just like the whole January 6th insurrection deal. These videos that are coming out of the actual security videos,
great example.
They're relevant, guys. You just got to have.
Great example.
Again, I'm really objective on this deal. It is what it is, and it's not what it's not, as we say in our office. It's a kind of a saying that one of my law partners, Jay, says a lot. We always hear it is what it is, right? But then the last part, and it's not what it's not. So
that is so good.
And so when you're thinking about an insurrection, that's the shittiest insurrection ever. There's no weapons on the insurrectors' side. There's no attempt.
Security guards opening doors.
All that's it's important information. There are people that did things wrong and that broke the law. If you look at objectively, yes. But you got to look at a number of things. Trump's speech, I'm going to focus on Trump, forget about everything else. I just wanted to bring that up as a point. But Trump's speech, what he said matters because he didn't lead the charge. So he's like, let's go, charge. He said, peacefully let your voice be heard. Well, we just went through a whole year
peacefully and patriotically, Mark.
Nobody was peacefully and patriotically doing that
No.
federal courthouses were being burned down by Antifa.
No.
Or, I mean, and again, I'm not trying to compare this with
But he
nothing-
also said we're going to fight like hell, otherwise we're going to lose our country. So all of a sudden,
all that's
so they
legit.
took that out of context and said that meant that he is leading an insurrection.
Well, let me tell you this. Context is king, because context is a bitch.
Exactly right.
And what I tell people all the time, and I use this in jury selections often, if I tell you, Karen, you're killing me, what do I mean? What do I mean? Karen, you're killing me.
That you're just joshing me, saying, "Stop what you're saying." It's like that's too much.
Well,
but it's not. You're killing me. Like
Well, you don't
I'm
know.
going to be dead.
Well, it depends. If I read and Nico said, Karen, you're killing me,
yeah.
without any emotion, without any inflection, without any facial expressions, without any context, it could mean three things. It could mean, Karen, you're killing me. You're cracking me up. I'm about to piss my pants.
Yeah.
Stop it. You're killing me. Ah, ha, ha, ha. It could be you're frustrating the shit out of me. Karen, you're killing me. Get it right. Or you could literally be killing me and stabbing me or hitting me with a... Karen, you're killing me, or you're crushing me with a car or something. I mean, but it's still, Karen, you're killing me.
But I love that she assumed the context.
Yeah. Whoops.
Yeah.
No, but that's what we
I
all
know.
do.
We
I
all do
know.
that because you knew that it wasn't. But my point is, it's still the same word. But words matter.
Yeah.
Context matters. Context is king. I'll get out of here. We use this stuff all the time, and it's an apologetics point we make all the time when we're explaining biblical understanding and hermeneutics and translations and linguistics and how they talked back then. But we do it all the time. Oh, I spent the day with you. What definitions matters, all I'm saying.
Exactly right.
And so what Trump said matters. I mean, and how he said it and the full context of what he said. And so for this Bellows chick
Great example.
to say, oh, I determined, think of it, the arrogance
It's
of this
so
lady.
arrogant.
I determined, after I reviewed everything, I determined it was an insurrection, and nowhere does it say it has to be.
I love that. What a great
bullshit.
example. Section 3 itself makes it the purview of Congress. It actually ends that way. Congress, if you remember, in January of 21, they brought forth the charge of incitement of insurrection in its second impeachment hearing. I think it was January 11th. A month later in February, they charged him. They found him guilty in the House of Representatives.
Right.
Of course it did. It was Democrat run. So you could argue there goes your impartiality. But then they went to the Senate, and the Senate failed to convict him. So that didn't come up in her calculus. Where there actually has been deliberation of this issue, Trump was found not guilty.
Were those party line decisions? I don't remember.
It was in the Senate. It was 57 to vote to 57 that he was guilty of incitement of insurrection to 43 in the Senate, and you need 2/3 in the Senate to find him guilty. So it was a majority Democrat controlled, but in the Senate it was. I thought.
Oh, you mean the House? You're talking about the
Yeah,
House?
I'm sorry. In the Senate, it's 100 senators, and it was 50. I think it was 53 or 57 to 43, and I think you're looking at a majority. The majority, I think, was Republican run. Am I wrong on that? So the point is that
Well, the Senate was narrow, right? It wasn't. We have a one vote. I mean, it's almost dead neck. It's the House is what back then was controlled by the Democrats.
The House was controlled by the Democrats. But when it made it to the Senate, you needed 2/3 to
Correct.
convict.
Right.
And they failed to do that.
Right.
And the vote, I think, was 57 to 43. 57 against.
Okay, got it. Okay, that's it.
And 43-4.
Got it.
And so they failed to convict him. So where we actually have a deliberation of this issue, any kind of voting on this issue, Trump came out not guilty. And so why didn't that make it into our calculus? You know,
Because we're
obviously
living
it
in
never came up in
Clowntown.
a court of law. He hasn't been found in a court of law, all of that. But where it should have, you know, that should have entered into her calculus, and she completely blew that off and took it upon herself. Look, I think that these things all weigh in his favor. I think he's been beating the drum that there's been a prosecutorial war on him. There's a weaponization of law enforcement, the Department of Justice against him. And I think all this does is it play into that. It vindicates him, and you see it show up in the votes. I would argue this is really helping him, really, and he needs it.
I'm gonna
He needs it
make
because he's got a hell of a 6 months coming up.
I'm going to start making a list of who's going to move out of the country when Trump wins. And then secondly, is Vivek dropping out? Do you think he's dropping out of the race?
Let Nico weigh in on that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, is there talk that he's going to drop out?
Well, I think he's run out of money.
You think so?
I think I heard something about he's running out of money.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's.
Do you think he's running out of money because, I mean, he's not going to be picked for VP.
I mean, I think he needs to be on. If Trump wins, I think he needs to be somewhere around Trump.
Oh, yeah, he will.
I really do. I mean, I think. Look, Vivek served our country well. I don't agree with everything that he advocated.
Yeah.
A lot I do. Stylistically, I have my opinions on how he debated versus how he interviews.
Yeah.
And I like the way he interviews over how he debates. But he's had conversations, and he's gone in enemy territory.
Yeah, he
And
is.
I think we'd be foolish to say he's been no factor in opening people's minds.
Yeah, agreed.
I mean, Bill Maher would consider voting for him. I mean,
Yeah.
and even though they had passionate debates, I mean, when he was on his show, I think he's a talented interviewer, and I think he's very good at making points. Like when that CNN lady embarrassed the hell out of her pretty recently, I thought that was very, very good. So, I mean, I think he's an important voice. I think he's done some remarkable stuff. I mean, there's no doubt about that. And he's gone on to shows that they weren't going to vote for him because they're not going to vote in the primary, at least not historically. But I'm glad he went out there. I'm glad he's sounding the alarms, and he's at least planting seeds, pressing the pause button on people's minds, maybe. Mm-hmm. And then they can take a conversation maybe that Vivek had, or somebody else had, or somebody maybe or Joe Rogan would have if he had somebody on their show that has conversation, or even a conversation that Bill Maher would have, and then they're looking at reality and saying, this kind of makes sense, and what you're advocating is showing up in my life. And that's how people change minds. I mean, that's what we have to start doing. We can't be snarky. We can't be condescending. We can't be arrogant. We can't be pompous. We can be confident. I think that's important to be confident. I think we need to be bold, but we also need to be gracious when it's appropriate also, and welcome people over. I never shame someone to come over. I can't stand that bullshit. I mean, like Steve Allison, tries to take a shot at my brother Mark. He's a rhino. There's nothing about my brother that's a rhino. I mean, I just can't stand that argument. I mean, Steve could be quote unquote nice guy, but it's so bad. I'm gonna invite Steve Allison. I'm gonna have Mark reach out to him. He can come on the show. They can debate as long as they want to. I doubt he will because his voting record sucks. You want to talk about rhino? It's like
Right.
what you're calling the other person. I mean, I don't know. I mean, let's see what your voting record is, because talk is cheap, Mr. Allison. And again, he seems like a nice guy. I don't know if he's a nice guy. He seems like it every time I've met him, but that's irrelevant. We don't need nice people. We need credible people in office to save us, and to give everybody, Democrats and Republicans alike, the opportunity that our founding fathers wanted for all people, for all citizens. Yeah. And not all ideas are the same. And so if you're going to run under a certain platform, you should be able to adhere to those ideals of that platform if they're reasonable and you believe in them. So, I mean, look, I don't know how I got there. Sorry, I was going to say something.
No, you were talking about Vivek. And
so
how he forced important conversations.
Yeah, we have to have them, man. And so I think it's good.
And I think that to the extent that DeSantis can score some points against Haley right now, who's believed to be ahead of DeSantis in some cases, I think they should credit Vivek for that, because he opened the front on that war, and he did it very skillfully. And he brought up areas where she's a true compromise and just more of the old guard, which is exactly what the base doesn't want. They can't stand Nikki Haley. I don't blame them. And so I'm bringing this up because there's also the issue of the Trump campaign contemplating bringing Nikki Haley on as Trump's running mate.
No,
that's
not going to happen.
And I'm reading more and more reports.
Oh, really?
About
That's a consideration?
It is. And I don't know the seriousness with which that they're considering it. You're shaking your head, Dom. I don't know, or maybe
you guys go to the bathroom. What's the matter with you?
Or maybe you're just being pensive.
No, but let me ask you this though. That's interesting, because I meant to bring this up on the radio and it just didn't come up. Maybe we'll bring it up next week.
Yep. But
they'll get the heads up here on the after show. Where's Kristi Noem been?
Yep.
She's been absent. All this talk about divorce.
She's been doing interviews.
Where?
I haven't seen.
I haven't seen anything with her. She was on every. I mean, she was everywhere, and now she's nowhere. I mean, I don't know. Interesting.
She's in South Dakota, and she's been pretty consistent.
But why
she hasn't changed her talking?
I'm not saying she's not. I'm just saying there was all that talk
Doesn't say
about
on Trump. She's been,
but there was
pretty-
all that talk about her and
I
that
know,
Trump
I know,
dude.
that died out.
And well, I mean,
I
but
would
then
not
she
have-
died out too. I haven't seen her around. That's all. If somebody knows, make a comment. I'll read it later. But I'm
Or
just
maybe
curious.
she's staying off
I like her.
target. Yeah.
Yeah. I've always
Overall.
thought that they should be the ticket, and I would
think
love
so,
I would
too.
love to see it. But there is more and more talk about Trump Haley, and I think that would be a significant problem. I don't particularly care for the DeSantis campaign. I don't think it's been effective. I don't think DeSantis has been effective. He's been an admirable, very effective governor, I think, as a presidential candidate, and he's been a disaster. I wish he would have waited till 2028. I wonder if he's expended all his political capital and if he'll be left standing in 2028. Serious questions about DeSantis. Campaign's going nowhere. But this week levied a very effective ad against Nikki Haley. It was brilliantly done. The DeSantis campaign.
Did they really?
And I just have to credit Vivek because again, he's opened the front on that war and he did it very effectively. He went after Nikki Haley and talked to her about a compromised nature. Hey Nikki, where's all the money coming from? Great question. That answer's still not out there. Nobody's stepped forward to answer the question. Her campaign surely hasn't. So it's sort of
But
the
DeSantis has-
topic
no
that shall
one's
not be
saying
discussed.
no one's saying she gained it illegally. They're just saying that it might have been
Brother, it's been
unethical.
2 weeks. She knows the environment in which that accusation was made. That would have been a really great opportunity for the campaign for her to come out and articulate and be open about that. Just be transparent about how you made your money. That's all.
Yeah.
And I would have. I mean, they'll just come out and say, look, I'm an open book, so to
Look,
speak.
Vivek, I like him. I like him overall. I think he's gotten more comfortable in his skin. I like when he's. I look, and I've noticed this in advocacy when you're a trial lawyer, finding your groove, or public speaker or debater or politician, quote unquote, public servant. You might start off a certain way, then it seems like he overcorrected and got like a little too. And I don't know. I haven't seen a lot of his interviews lately, but he's got a different look in his face. When he first interviewed, you saw that
Yes, he
and
is
it
finding
was
his
kind
way.
of,
Yeah.
and then he kind of came up too much. I was like, man, how do you go from that, like you said, Christy labeled him good, that chat GPT, whatever,
ChatGPT.
kind of caricature to being this like Indian Trump dude. It was weird, and he didn't even pull it off right. And then, but when he interviews, I really like his interview style. I think he's good. He's informative. He's not a pushover. He doesn't let things slip by. He says, "No, hold on, let's go back." I mean, he's very skilled in interviewing, debating, and maybe that's a whole skill in itself. And so
Yeah.
it's hard, man, in those settings to debate like that.
And DeSantis has two things going against him. He's white and he's male.
And
that's
he-
not going to work.
And he's been a walking sedative.
Yeah.
I mean, he just doesn't command a lot of excitement. Again, back to Nico's point, we don't want nice guys and necessarily entertaining guys, but you got to engage with people. You got to bring them in, and he hasn't been very effective at doing that. But what's happened with Haley this week is truly pivotal, and I think, frankly, I think it's imploding. And maybe maybe it's wishful thinking because I'm not a supporter of Haley. I don't particularly care for her.
She had so much
so-
promise, man.
But I think
I don't
she is.
like
I think
her.
she is imploding.
Had.
She was at a New Hampshire town hall event, and she was asked a question on what was the root cause of the Civil War. And
Okay.
here's her answer.
The root cause of the Civil War, like the one we had.
The Civil War,
Okay, what did she say?
basically, what caused the Civil War. And her answer was, I think it always comes down to the role of government and what the rights of people are. And I will always, and this is in the aftermath, she goes, the root cause of the war, the issue was how government was going to run. That's basically her answer. How government, that's what was at issue. And we went to war over how the government was going to be run. And so,
Went to war out of the government. Okay. what does she mean by that?
right, exactly. So what she should have said, hey, predominantly it was, the Civil War was because of slavery.
Slavery, yeah.
Exactly. And so she provides this sort of mealy-mouthed answer, and so she got all kinds of flack for that. To a straightforward question, DeSantis pounced on it,
In that same town
right?
hall
Because
meeting?
in the aftermath, she came back and she goes, "I'm from the South. I mean, I'm the former governor of South Carolina. Of course, I know it was fought over slavery. Why didn't you say that?" Now there were other issues, but that was the predominant issue. And she gave a mealy-mouthed answer because it had something to do with how government was going to run and that kind of thing. And so
Well, wasn't it fought over basic human rights, which is whether we believe people are free or not, and way of life, because the South didn't want to change their way of life.
But the issue.
No, I know, but basic
Yeah.
human rights, slavery, number one. Basic human rights, whether someone, black descent, African American descent, black, had
Yeah.
rights. So basic human rights, whether it applies to blacks, browns, whomever, it's about basic human rights, slavery, and then a way of life. Those are the two reasons that I've heard scholars talk about, which I think makes sense. Of course, the first one being slavery, of course. I'm not trying to downplay that at all.
But her answer was not
But
acceptable.
slavery affected the way people lived.
And slavery encapsulated those concerns.
That's my point. Yes, I think that's what their point was.
And I think that would have been an important word to bring up, especially because of the position she's running for and because she's running on the GOP. And we're always being thrown the charge of being racist. That would have been a great opportunity for her to show some basic command of the issue.
That's right.
And then the questioner asked her, followed up, and he wasn't having it. He was asking her about slavery. And she goes, "What do you want me to say about slavery?"
Eek.
I mean,
So then she knew it.
so then in the aftermath, she's on some interview and she doubles down on stupidity. Well, of course I know. Of course I know it's about slavery. And then she accuses him of being a Democrat plant. So DeSantis fires back and puts together, I think, a brilliant ad. And he goes, look, here you have Haley. She says nothing about slavery, but then she knew all the while that it was about slavery. This is what she does. She's a master of the 180. She is a born flip-flopper. And so this ad just shows her saying one thing and saying another, saying X, then saying Y, saying X, and saying Y. And in between is there's pressure. And so they just go issue after issue. And then it starts off by her saying, I will not run for president if Trump is running. And then you see her announcing, I am announcing my candidacy for president of the United States. In the aftermath of Trump announcing that he was running for president.
Wow.
I will not now, not ever, support a gas tax. And then she shows her, I support a 10-cent increase in the gas tax over the next 3 years or something like that.
Wow.
And then just
That is
literally go
effective.
issue after issue after issue after
gotta find
issue.
that.
And I thought it was, I don't know. I think it's a death knell. Maybe I'm overstating it, but I think people really get pissed off about that kind of stuff because it is the number one charge against politicians. They'll say whatever the hell they need to say to pursue their political ambitions. And Nikki Haley encapsulates that. And I don't disagree with that. I think she does encapsulate that very well. I think she's an opportunist, and I think she's an empty suit.
Well, there you go.
At the end of the day.
I got my answer.
Happy New Year. Well, look, it's
Sorry you asked. Anyway,
Karen, you
we
good?
got to thank Vivek for that because
Yeah.
I think he's been on that train. He's been on her, man.
When he put her on that
Hey,
spot
my
and she
goodness.
didn't have anything to say, that was ugly for her.
He's not let up.
No.
So anyway, good for him.
I like him overall.
We're done.
Yep, we're done. We're good. Happy New Year to everybody.
And
Right?
don't forget, she said that she thought China was a great friend to the United States right before she said, I think they're an enemy of the United States. I mean, literally issue after issue. You got to go
Send me
back and see that
Send me
ad.
the video. I got to see that now.
Got to go back and see that ad.
Dom, Happy New Year. Thank you, brother, for being part of us. Karen,
Thank
George,
you, thank
another
you.
year under
And
the
don't
books.
forget, we
another
should support
calendar
the
year.
UN before we should defund it. Sorry, couldn't resist.
Man, you really got like PTSD with Nikki Haley.
It just goes on and on and on. And then she said, social media organizations should demand that people relinquish their name when they're providing
That's
their
what
content.
I was
And then she
so
came back and
freaked
she
out
said,
about.
absolutely not.
Yeah, I
they
freaked
should
out
not
about that
provide
one.
their
I totally freaked out about
It's like
that
which
I got to
Nikki
send me
Haley
this
exam-
commercial. I got to see it now. It really got me interested.
Which Nikki Haley
Wow, that's
exactly? Oh, don't forget the what was it? The gender transition. She was asked point blank on national television, do you think that a 12-year-old child should, a 12-year-old female should say, you know what, I really feel like I need to go through gender transition surgery because I believe I'm a male? And she goes, I think the law should stay totally out of that. Let them do whatever they want to do. You know, it's sort of the parent's decision. And then she says, oh my goodness, under no circumstances should a child be able to make that decision. I mean, literally within minutes of each other. So this is essentially the DeSantis ad, but I think it characterizes her very, very well. And voters have every reason to be concerned.
Done. Not that she was ever,
Disintegrating.
not that she was a contender anyway,
No.
but still.
But I like that word. George.
But
They say
but what I'm-
the resurgence of Nikki Haley here, right? They say that she's going to be
Nah.
a tour de force. Of course not.
Well, I
She's
mean,
only 30 points behind in New Hampshire. And 50
yeah, well,
points.
this could something
else.
like that can really harm any future political
Yeah.
aspirations she
So
may
do you
have
see why I have
had.
PTSD? Do you forgive me for
Yeah,
that?
no,
You know,
yeah,
this
it's
kind of
okay.
stuff. I
I'll hug
can't
you after
stand
the
that
show's
stuff,
over.
man.
Dom, give him a hug. Guys, well,
It's just good to have friends. Happy New Year to you.
yeah, go ahead. But
It'll be a new year, by the way, next time we meet.
it will be a new
Oh my
year,
God.
and there'll be no beard. I'm gonna
Oh,
shave. It's
yay.
time to
I'm
shave.
all
No
for
beard?
that.
No beard.
No beard?
I only keep
Oh,
it for
no
November.
beard. Sorry.
No beard.
Should piss off everybody who's listening. They're
No,
like,
no.
what's Lewis saying?
No beard. What'd you think I said?
Beer.
Oh, beard. I don't
No
care if you're German.
beard.
Just don't drive.
As
with me.
if.
Or call me. But no beard. That's why it's somewhere last week of October to right after January 1. Unless we have a snow blizzard that year, I kept it to February because everything was shut down anyway. But needed
Because he had to
extra
be outside chopping wood.
time.
It's a big weekend for you. You always tell people, what are your parting words? Stay out of trouble, but
Don't.
If you get in trouble, call me.
Yeah. Don't call
Yeah.
me.
No, call me. If you get in trouble, God forbid. But God
Great
bless you. I
line.
hope you do take some inventory over this year of what
Yeah, same
spiritually, of course, number one for us, for Christians, spiritually, in your walk with the Lord. Familiar, I mean, with your family, professionally, personally, advocacy, politically, whatever, just conversations. And then what this next calendar year, look, the new year can start at any moment. The new year can start right now for you, I mean, this second, and start something new. But calendar year, I think we all focus in on that because we can fixate on that and count days and wind things down and wind them up and get them started. So hope you do that. I think everybody should take that inventory for your life and your family's life and your future and your plans and aspirations. If you're a prayerful person, pray for our country. Influence minds and hearts. Talk, have conversations, inform yourself. Serve others, love the Lord. I mean, for us, we love God and love others, and that looks like what it looks like in your life and based off your talents and opportunities you have. And have a blessed new year. Please be safe and enjoy it with your family. God bless you.